I wanted to talk about why I use the word toxic. I think it's really important to get onto this. So, in many respects, what I'm talking about with the types of parents that I'm talking about in most cases, I'm talking about covert narcissistic people. Now, I don't use the word narcissist because well, I do use it sometimes, but I sort of steer away from using it because it's a diagnostic term, and then you'll get loads of narky. I'll say unfiltered what I think, and then I'll try and formulate it in a nicer way to not upset people. One of the reasons I don't say the word or I steer away from using terms like narcissist is because they're a medical term. And if you use them, the narky fucking medical people, the narky psychologists, not all psychologists are not a narky, but some of them are. And the narky ones will come for you saying, are you able to diagnose people with that? And I'm like, listen, I don't give a fuck if some of these people have got a diagnosis or not. I fucking know when I'm around one. I know in my body. And I think people that have grown up and lived with them and have a level of sensitivity, they know as well. Call me arrogant, call me what you want. But stay away from the word narky, and then, not narky, from narcissist, then those narky people like that won't come for you. Yeah? Or they will come for you, but you give them less ammo. But probably the more main reason why I use the word toxic and maybe not abusive, for example, because most of what I'm talking about is abuse. Actually, all of what I talk about is abuse. It's because I think that most people that need to hear some of the things that I talk about wouldn't say that they grew up with abusive parents, because that feels like too much of a stretch. It takes a long time to realize, wow, what I experienced was abuse. So when you say toxic, it's a more broader term, and it opens up. Space for people to be able to come in. But I did look at the history of the word toxic because it's always interesting. I love it whenever people do this. My Gabor loves to do it. Then he look at the history of words. So to copy him and to do that, I've looked at the history of the word. So originally it was to do with, where does it say? In ancient Greek literature, the adjective toxic derives from the noun that is to arc. And that means to use a bow and arrow, right? And then it was taken on by medicalized. It was used as a medical term. The military department, despite being used by the military department of archers, the medical context of the term is that a substance has the characteristic of a poison. This concept of the term survived until today with little differentiation. The ancient Greek medical literature gave the answer about how this term received its medical meaning. The physicians and pharmacologists of those times pointed out that it was a custom to dip in the pike of an arrow in a poison before it was fired against an enemy. The main scope was to injure the enemy in order to be killed, not due to the wound that was provoked, but a cause to the symptom of the poisoning that were presented after the hit. So when you look at it that way, right, I'll read that again. The main scope was to injure the enemy in order to be killed, not due to the wound that was provided, but a cause of the symptoms of the poisoning that were presented after the hit. And when you know, you know. If you've grown up with a toxic parent or you've lived with a toxic parent, that's very, very fitting. Yeah, I think it's very, very fitting. It's not the act of causing the wound, but the infection that it leaves behind. And that's what that's what happens when you grow up at the hands of a toxic parent. That's exactly what happens. It's the infection that's caused. And like, they may create small visible wounds. You know, we talk about like death by 1,000 cuts, but it's not the wound that they create. It's the way in which it's delivered. It's what they dip it in before they do it to you. That's what causes. It's the poison in their words. Their words create the wound, but the poison in the way that they're delivered is what leaves lasting impact on you. When you start to see it in that way, you start to realize that the term makes perfect sense. People get upset because they say, you know, you can't label a person toxic. And I'm like, well, fucking why not? Like, to be honest with you, like, I don't get that hung up on it. Like, if you want to call somebody, if you want to change it and say a parent that has toxic behaviors, then do that. I don't really care. Like, what I find bizarre is that what I'm talking about is a very real issue that affects people on a larger scale than we wish to believe. It helps people to be able to talk about it. It helps them to be able to have a label that helps them to understand their experience. And of all the things that I talk about, from people being sexually abused by parents, financially abused, emotionally abused, physically abused, all of the stuff that I talk about, you're getting hung up on whether I call them a toxic parent or say it's a parent that has toxic behavior. Like, I think you've got a problem. I really think you've got a problem if you're struggling with that. Of all the things that I've said, if that's what you're picking out, I think you have a problem. And I think it's to do with toxic positivity. The reason people don't want to say toxic parent or label somebody as toxic is because they want to keep on their rose-tinted view of the world. Yeah? If you want to keep your rose-tinted view and say, I don't know, Jimmy Savile wasn't toxic, it just his behaviors were, then you fucking crack on and do that. Yeah? And you live your life pretending that we live in some kind of fucking spiritual realm where everybody's love and light, just making silly mistakes. That ain't the world that I live in, man. It ain't the world that I live in. I have met people and have known people, and we can all be sure that there are. Jimmy Savile died a toxic person. He was a toxic person for most of his adult life. And if you're upset that we're going to lay, and I'm using him as an extreme example, but you make no fucking mistake about this. You make no mistake about this. The toxic parents that I'm talking about are like it throughout their whole child's life. From the moment the child is born to the moment